Savvy Central Radio, drawing out the best from our guests, with host Christina Nitchman.
Our sponsor for today is Regina Huber, speaker, coach, and founder of Transform Your Performance. She helps businesswomen move into their positive yes energy and find their magnetic power and confident presence so they can step into the spotlight and into their role as leaders. Her clients include entrepreneurs and corporate executives who want to move to the next level of their business or career faster and more powerfully, and of course to create more wealth for their companies and themselves. To find out more about Regina and her business, visit transformyourperformance.com. Hello everyone, and welcome to Savvy Central Radio. This is your host, Christina Nitchman. Each week on Savvy, we host successful individuals and business owners, inviting them to share their dreams, stories, wisdom, and lessons learned in their field of business. Our guest today is Norma Yaeger, author of Breaking Down the Walls. Norma was the first woman stockbroker to be permitted on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. Today, Norma shares details from her inspirational book, Breaking Down the Walls. She shares how she was able to break down the walls of prejudice against women in the workplace, how she was able to negotiate equal pay for equal work, and how she became a pioneer in the women's movement. To find out more about Norma and her extraordinary book, visit Norma Yaeger, YAEGER.com. Hi, Norma. Welcome to Savvy Central Radio. How are you?
Hi, Christina. I am fine. Thank you for asking.
I am very, very happy to have you. You have an extraordinary story, Norma. Well, you are one of the first women that entered into the stock exchange on Wall Street and opened up the doors for all of us other women out there to enter into many other industries that were only men industries back when you were working in the 50s and the 60s. So explain to our audience a little bit about your career and how you came to working as a stockbroker and at the New York Stock Exchange.
Well, I was one of the women that got born at the time in the 1960s. I was born in the 1930s, and women at that time were not expected to have careers. The only goal they had was to finish school, get married, and have their babies, which is a wonderful career. And I did just that. I got finished City College of New York, got married, had 3 lovely children, and lo and behold, my husband lost his job. And here I am, 10 years married with 3 children and no income, and we were going to starve. So I said, I better get myself up and going. And the only thing that I really loved, which I had got at City College of New York, was banking and finance. I loved it. So I was a bookkeeper for a couple of years when I did work early in my marriage. But that was not what I wanted to do. So I noticed that one of the major brokerage firms in New York, which at that time was called Hornblower and Weeks, and a very large firm, was starting a training program for stockbrokers. Well, nobody told me there were no women stockbrokers, so I got myself up, made an appointment, and met with the gentleman who was doing the interviews. So he said to me, "Oh my God," he says, "we never thought of hiring a woman." He says, but, it might be interesting. There are a lot of women that are starting to earn money, and you could maybe approach them. He said, if you could pass the entry exam, which is a 3-day psychological test, to see if you have an aptitude for this kind of a business. Oh, I said, well, let me take them. Absolutely, I'd try for it. And I did very well with it. He called me in. And he said, we're going to be hiring you, but we have no idea what to pay you because we've never hired a woman before. Well, I looked at him and I said, well, why should that make any difference? I'm joining a training program. What are you paying everybody else? Oh, he says, they're all men, and he says, and they have big expenses. They have wives, they have families, they have travel, they have clothing. I said, I have the same problem. I have a family, I have to travel, I have to get clothing, I have an additional expense. And he says to me, what's that? I said, I have to hire a wife. Oh, he said, I never thought of that. I said, well, consider what my expenses are going to be. He said, you know what? I'm glad we hired you. You talked me into it. perfect. You are getting the same salary as everybody else. And that's how you have to negotiate as a woman, not being nasty or uppity, but to negotiate and give them a good reason why you're entitled to the extra pay. And you're entitled because if you're doing the same job, you should have it. And so today we're having the exact same problem, Christina. Women out there are told they cannot work the same, you cannot get paid the same money as their colleagues. And I think that is terrible. I think women have to get together and join and be a force. At any rate, I continued with that class. I did very, very well. It was in New York on Park Avenue. And I realized that if I want to get clients who are going to buy stock, it had to be moneyed people. So I put on a beautiful hat. I bought a costume that I wore, and the hat and the costume and a brooch I wore every day, so that anybody passing by, coming into our business, saw me differently than the secretaries that were sitting at the desk. They would say, "Who's that lady with the hat and the brooch?" And so I put on, and I realized that you have to dress for the job. If you have to approach wealthy people, you have to appear to be wealthy. If I'm not successful, why should anybody want to buy stock from me? And that is how I built my business, thinking through what it was necessary to get that job. And, at that time, it was very difficult for women in general.
Yeah. I find that fascinating that you had to take a 3-day psychological exam. I didn't know that was necessary. Is that necessary today for anyone entering the stock exchange as well, or?
I don't know, but it should be, because not everybody is qualified to do this kind of a job. You really have to love it, and you have to be capable of, liking the math and what is involved with that kind of a business. Because a lot of the questions were, how do you handle an intangible sale? Intangible means you don't have a product to talk about. You have to tie the product, the stock you're selling, to the individual's needs and ability and wants. So you don't say, here's a dress that's blue and made of silk and so on. You can't do that. So when I took this exam, that was the kind of questions they would ask. How do you sell this product, and how would you do this, and so on? And I obviously scored pretty well, if they wouldn't have considered hiring me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating, Norma. This recalls to me work we had to do several years back in a class. And their whole basic thing was to get you out of your skin, doing something you were uncomfortable doing, stretching yourself to do something you've never done. So they had this go in the street and talk to strangers and sell an invisible product, something that wasn't real, absolutely fake. They gave me an invisible burrito. Go in the street and sell an invisible burrito. Whoever first could come in with 3 sales wins. Now, the only catch is once the person was willing to take out his wallet and hand you the money, you had to give it back to him and tell him it was a coursework that you were just doing in class. But the point is, 2 people out of 50 completed the task. Everyone else could not. So I think what's interesting, Norma, is that you're indeed right. Not everyone's probably fit to sell that sort of type of service.
Exactly. And that's what you learn in the training program, how to present yourself, how to sell. But the ability to make up this invisible thought, is not easy. It's a very difficult thing to do. As a matter of fact, one of my first, they teach you to cold call. You got to call on strangers, just like you did, going out into the street and just picking out a stranger. But we had to go through the buildings of New York and be able to get in to see the owner or the person in charge so that you could make your pitch. And this was a difficult job. First of all, most people can't take, rejection. You're rejected more than you're accepted. You know that. Yeah. And so one of the things that I did during this training program, where we were sent out to do some cold calling and report back, is I walked into the jeweler, Harry Winston, and I said, "I'd like to speak to Mr. Winston." And he said to me, the gentleman that was there said, "Well, Mr. Winston isn't in today, but could I tell the secretary or his personal woman that takes care of his things what you want?" I said, "Well, I'd like to speak to her first before I tell you what I need, but if you would allow me to come up to see her, we can have that discussion. So he called up to the woman, and she said, yes, certainly, send her right up. And I did. Now, this woman handed all of Mr. Winston's investments, all of his businesses, everything she handled for him. See, she was a smart woman. Nobody believed there were women that are smart. That was the other problem. Anyway, when I got through, I told her I was in a training program. I'd like to be able to service Mr. Winston's account through her. And once I graduate and get my license, may I call upon him? Well, she was so impressed with the idea that they are training women that she says, it's about time they think that we have some brains. She said, I want you to follow these 3 stocks for me. Anything you hear about them, anything you learn about them, call me. And when I got my license, I did. And she became my first big customer. Harry Winston's account was mine. Wow. Not all of it, but enough to make a dent into what I had to do. Mm-hmm. And so that was my first experience in going out and trying to sell somebody, and it was fabulous. And I developed a technique. I did very well in the cold calling. I called. I didn't care about rejection. They said no. I went to the next number. I walked the buildings. We didn't make phone calls. We had party lines. We couldn't get out on the phones. We had to walk through the buildings and meet the secretaries up front and try to get in to see the owner. The other problem we had as a woman in my time was that we couldn't have bank accounts. They didn't allow women to have bank accounts unless their husband signed on for it. Mm-hmm. They didn't allow us to they didn't have checking accounts. By no means were we able to get a checking account. A credit card was unheard of. I don't even think they had them at that time. Well, they did have, because I had a Saks Fifth Avenue card, so maybe they had, credit cards, but they certainly weren't qualified to have them. The income they required, was not possible. I was working for my firm, and I couldn't even open my stock brokerage account with them. They said they don't open brokerage accounts for women. I said, so what do you expect me to do? I'm talking to women, I'm talking to men, and I can't buy any stock myself because I'm a woman. I said, that's disastrous. And they changed their policy. So you can change things if you make it that you're discussing it with them, why it's inconceivable, what is happening out there. The world was changing. Women at that time didn't have the jobs that are open for women today. I mean, look at the job opportunities. Take the women in radio and TV. They're anchor women today. There are women doing delivery of FedEx and UPS. There are women that are big CEOs and CFOs of major corporations. There are women police, firefighters, doctors, dentists, airline pilots, and they're even in the armed forces, in combat roles. I mean, in 50 years, there has been such a change in the world, and the women had gotten the benefit of it as well. Yeah. So I'm proud of us.
Yeah. Amen. But what's interesting, Norma, with all of the progress you're mentioning, it's still quite interesting that a lot of us women, including myself, I remember back in corporate, often I would transition from job to job to title to title. I worked in corporate finance myself for over 20 years. And when there was a position up for grabs, generally it was the men who were put into the higher positions. A number of the higher positions I applied for, I was told, well, we're not really hiring right now. A week later, a man in my department would get hired into it. Often, if I did get into a little bit higher up title, I would get a lower salary. Now, the sad thing is that you were mentioning here when you got on the table to negotiate is you said, well, why can't I get what everyone else is getting? I'm doing the same work. But what's interesting is I never even thought to ask that question. So I think it's fabulous that you're out here today. Many of the listeners on our show who listen in are women, so I'm hoping that they will listen and take heed to your advice and to your example and not just sit back. I think change comes about by asking, as you said, not being disrespectful, but just standing up for yourself.
Well, that's what I'm trying to do with the book. I wrote the book primarily for my family, and then when I started to have it printed and published and so on, they told me what a fabulous book this would be for women and men out there that are entering the corporate world to understand some of the things that they have to do. I'm mentoring a lot of women today with the same problem that you're having. You don't ask for the order. That's what you learn to do in the training program that I went through. You must ask for the order. If you want the equal pay, you have to ask for it. Doesn't mean you'll get it, but you'll have to ask for it. If you don't ask for it, there's no opportunity of getting it. And I think that's one of the major problems with women. We ourselves don't have the confidence that we are deserving of it, and we should. If we know, the most important thing that you have to be successful in the business world is you have to have the education. You have to have that self-ambition that you want to go out there and win. You have to be determined to do the job properly and have some self-confidence when you walk in for the job, that this job I can do well. Please hire me. I'm going to be great for you. That's the attitude you have to take, mentally.
Yeah.
And when I mentor women that way, they change their attitudes. It becomes something that they stand up and say, I am able to do this job. I had an interesting experience when I was on a different talk show. This woman said to me, I'm going to be the first woman sports announcer. And she says, what suggestion could you give me? I said, the first thing you must do is your homework. You must go home and study every player in every team. Know his record, know where he comes from, know where he's going, and so on and so forth. I said, because nobody expects you to know all the answers, but you should. So if they ask you a question or you're doing some broadcasting, you want to be on top of the job. So educate yourself in what your job requires and make sure that you don't ever have to say, well, I'll look it up. You should know it. And she said, well, thank you very much. That's exactly what I thought I needed to do. I said, congratulations for that job. Go to it. And she did a fabulous job.
That is great. And what you mentioned before about how women really have to stand in their power and ask for the order, I think it goes even one step more. Some of the women who I talk to are asking for the sale, but really undervaluing themselves dollar-wise. And again, it goes back to why are you undervaluing for whatever your service is compared to what the market value is.
Yes, you have to feel you know the subject. You have to feel that you're going to do the job well, better than the next guy. Yeah. You have to feel that way. And if you don't, then go out and learn about the job and get the education required to do that job so that you feel proud of what you know. You go in and, you're selling somebody. You're selling, again, your intangible. You're selling yourself. And that is very important to be proud of yourself. One of the problems a lot of women have that I think in the mentoring I realized is the fear. The worst thing about fear is the fear itself. When you are afraid, it shows. And you will not step forward to ask for that raise or ask for that wage that's equal. You are afraid to. And that's the fear that we have, the fear of rejection. So what if they say no?
They might say yes.
They may say yes. You got a 50-50 chance. So that's the point I'm trying to make. The fear is something that I learned you have to learn to overcome. You learn from your failures. In my book, Breaking Down the Walls, I have to tell you that I had many successes, but just as many failures. I've opened several different opportunities that didn't make it for me. And it only made me stronger. I realized what I was doing that was not right, and the next venture that I went forward, I was able to overcome that problem. So don't be afraid of failure. It's okay. It makes you better. People learn from bankruptcies. You'd be surprised. When you go into a bankruptcy, you learn the next thing you venture for, how not to go into bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. So I think that you have to not be afraid of failure. It makes you stronger. Yeah. Failing makes you stronger.
Yeah. And I think most of the guilt and shame upon any failure we perceive we might have is really put upon ourselves. I think when you talk to other people, many years ago I'd written a blog called 101 Mistakes and What I Learned in Business, just for my own kind of journal. And it was interesting because when I'd written it, people read it and they said, well, I've made the same mistakes. I think all of us in some fashion have made a number of mistakes that other people have made. And when you look at it and you talk to other people, it's not that big of a deal when you realize we all make mistakes.
We are our own worst enemies. We criticize and put ourselves down all the time. If you realize that the next party looking at you might be very proud of what you've done. So look in the mirror and be proud of yourself, please.
Yeah.
And as I said before, dress for the job. I can't tell you how many women I see that come to work and they are not prepared to look like they're doing a job. They're sloppy, they're ungroomed well, and you'll never succeed that way. You have to look successful and, and feel successful. Those are the three things that I want to tell women that are going out for the first time to try to find a job. The other problem I encountered, which Christina, you may have, and most of the women today that are going into the business world, is trying to balance between family and career. Mm-hmm. That is a big job. That's a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of your tips in that area?
Well, the first and most important thing is plan your day. You have to know where you have to be, when you have to be there, and how much of it you can devote to that particular job that you're doing. If you have a young family, you have to be sure that their needs are taken care of, because you don't want to worry on a job, where's my child today? Is she being abused? Is something going on? Where is my child? So the first thing you need to do is make sure that your children are going to be properly cared for, whether they're in school, somebody should be picking them up from school, whether they're too young for school, get somebody in to stay with your child, but make sure, and you're going to be earning more money, so invest a little bit in the help that you need. Mm. You also need to plan the day with your husband. He's going to come home and you're going to come home and you want to have some time for him. You want him to participate in the family. Make sure that he's a willing partner. So when you go out to work, that part of the job at home is his job as well. And you also have to be sure that other friends and neighbors around are aware of that you are working. You have to be able to be interested in other families and their needs and careers and things, and help out each other. Mm-hmm. So I was very fortunate that I was able to get full-time help. So I knew that my family was being taken care of, and that was fortunate because I started to earn a nice living. So I supported that. Mm-hmm. Not that I had it to start with. But I had to make sure I had 3 children at home. Mm-hmm. I can't just get up in the morning and say goodbye and close the door. That had to be taken care of. You want to involve your children in what you are doing. Let them know what you're doing during the day. Discuss it. The most important thing you could do is have dinner around a table with your family, no matter how small they are or how old they are, with your husband, and discuss your plans. What are you doing? What did you do during the day? If you're going to plan a vacation, get their input. Let them know let them tell you what they've done, what their career needs are, and what their desires are. And also, their school activities, their own activities. They have a life and they have a program themselves. Mm. So you have to coordinate the calendars with your family. You have to realize that, housekeeping and cleaning and marketing, all of that is a chore that has to be done. If there are older children, they have to participate in that. If there are younger children, again, you have to have the help that can do that for you. You can't do it all.
I like that. I like so much. I really, really like that you touched on dressing for the part of success. So I like that you mentioned that, because you were mentioning that a lot of people show up lately to job interviews or to work all scruffed up, and that really takes a toll on your confidence as well.
I know that when I get dressed up and I look in the mirror and I look good, I stand taller and I feel better. And I'm only 5 feet, so standing taller was important for me. But I do think that you're right. It does make you feel better when you're dressed nicely.
Yeah.
In my time, men used to come in with jackets and shirts and ties, and they were dressed nicely. They really were, with polished shoes. They looked wonderful. The women came in not too nice a dress or whatever. They were skirts at the time. We weren't permitted to wear slacks. Slacks were a no-no. So we had to come in with dresses or skirts and so on. And they were shabby. You don't have to have a lot of money to look well. You have to be interested in looking well. Even in shopping, you have to shop with the idea in mind that you are going to be shopping for the job. As I said before, I went in, I had no money. I had to buy on credit. I had to convince the people that I was buying from that I was, going to get the credit card, like the Saks Fifth Avenue. He said to me, "How are you going to pay this?" I said, "Look, I have a job. Saks is on Fifth Avenue and 49th Street. I was working on 50th and Park Avenue." I said, "Call my company. I have a good job. I'm earning good money. And there is no reason why I cannot pay my own bill. My husband will not sign on with the application because that is not his responsibility." And you know what? It worked.
Yeah.
It worked. They called. I got the credit card to Saks. I went in. I bought the outfit that I had to have to look well. The hat, the gloves, the shoes, whatever the outfit was. And that makes a big difference. And it did. It made me look like $1 million, so I could sell $1 million worth of stock.
And I love the fact that you were just being reasonable in every situation where things were conceivable, not possible for women. You just were reasonable and put a reasonable argument on the table, and they were like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. You have a paying job. You can pay the bill. Okay, fine. We'll give you credit."
Exactly. And there were no credit that time. You couldn't go in the bank and get a loan. It had to be someone that was willing to do it for you. So, again, we're negotiating. We are negotiating our whole life.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to think about. You're going out and you're selling an intangible. That intangible is you. And don't be afraid to tell them, how you feel. In a nice way, not in an argument way.
Yeah. There's no reason for that. I mean, like you said, if you're being reasonable, the other person should be able to hear you. If you start arguing or being decisive or nasty, you're just going to turn the other person off, and they're not going to hear anything you have to say.
Exactly.
In this day and age, we have a lot of credit, and you get credit when you're in college. They start throwing credit cards at you. What is your advice for women out there building their financial well-being?
One of the most important things about earning more money is what to do about it and what to do with it, and plan where you want that money to take you in time. So a financial plan for the family has to include retirement, not only your daily and weekly and monthly requirements, but the most important thing is to budget your daily requirements so that you have some money left over so you can put it away for retirement. As you start adding to income, of course, there's more that you can put away. So at the very beginning, your daily needs are important to be covered. So you budget those and try to live within the budget. A woman needs to know about investments. They have to learn about the stock market. They have to learn about insurance needs, life, auto, home, etc. They need to know also their vacation needs. How much money needs to be put away for that. You have to think about your children's education. How much you need to do that. So all of these things you take planning, and you sit down with your husband and you sit down with your children because they're part of the budget.
Yep.
They have to know that they can't have everything they want. And then, of course, you have to worry about emergencies. You never know when something comes in that you have to have the extra money for. So there's medical insurance you have to cover. There's all kinds of things that have to be part of a budget. And the more you make, the easier it is, of course. But even at the very beginning, you have to put aside a small portion of it. And savings must be a part of the budget for these unforeseen expenses. Yeah. I really think that If you sit down with your family and make the plan, doesn't mean that every month it's going to be great. Some months you have more left than others. But if you start with a plan and try to work the plan, it becomes workable.
Mm. And what I really like from hearing what you said before and then bringing it forward is including the kids on the whole thing, including them on the budget, letting them know what's going on in the house, having sit-down meals. That is so important today. How many people have I heard, families and such, where they're all in different parts of the house, just grabbing a snack and running to their room and sitting on their computer or in front of the TV. We need to connect as a family, as a unit, to really help each other all grow as a community and in our families. It's imperative.
You know what's lost today? Conversation.
Oh.
We don't have conversation. Everybody's on a cell phone. Everybody's clicking. Everybody's looking at their cell phones, and nobody's talking to each other. You could have guests come in, and everybody's sitting on the sofa with their cell phones. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. Conversation is lost today. And you really have to force yourself to do that, at least with your family. Get the conversation going.
Yeah.
Even if it's just an hour a day.
Mm-hmm.
Get the conversation, because if you don't share that conversation with your family, they're all on their own planet somewheres.
Yeah.
So bring them into the family, sit down and have your dinner together, and try to make sure that they sit and wait for dessert.
Absolutely, Norma. And I would say like a restriction zone of like 1 hour. Sit down, dinner, no cell phones, no electronics, no TV, 1 hour. I think we can do that.
Yeah, you have to do that. I mean, it's not easy. Children want to run in all directions. They've got homework. Their friends are calling and so on and so on. But if you set aside, just like a budget, and say, look, we're going to all have dinner together. Plan your activities before or after dinner, but not while we're having our dinner. Yeah. We have things to discuss, and we want to hear about what you have to say. And then if we make a plan to go somewhere for our vacation, if you're involved, you're not going to say to me, I don't want to go there. Yeah. You're going to go because you've made the decision to join as well. Children need to be managed. They just need to know that there are people that care about them, that are interested in them, and their wants and needs.
Yeah. And you've mentioned that 3 times. That is so important. I don't think parents think enough how important it is to just hear their children out. They think that, maybe what's going on in their school isn't that important compared to what's going on in our adult lives. But it is very important to our kids. So listen to their concerns and such. It's been fabulous having you out here today, sharing your wisdom and talent and gifts with our audience. And before we head on out, I want you to let the audience know how they can find out more about your book, Breaking Down the Walls, and where they can get a copy and all that jazz.
Well, firstly, let me direct them to my website, which is Norma Yaeger. And make sure you spell Yaeger properly, YAEGER.com. My books are sold. Breaking Down the Walls are sold at Amazon online or in their Barnes & Noble in their stores, or also online. I also have an ebook which can be used on the Kindle or the Nook or any one of the computer programs. I think finance is something everybody needs to know about and should learn. If you're going to invest in the stock market, learn about it. Again, it's an investment that you've saved and hard-earned money to do. And so a little bit in my book, I have a chapter on explaining the basics of investments and why everybody should think about doing some as a form of investment. So, my book, Breaking Down the Walls, is, I think, a learning experience for everybody. Young children coming out of high school and college, it should be read. I think it's almost a Bible, because it teaches you what to anticipate and expect and how to deal with it. So please buy my book and let me know that you enjoyed it. And Christina, I'd love you to read it as well. I'm going to send you a copy. I would even be happy to send the next 10 people that call into your program a book as well.
Oh, you're such a blessing. Thank you. It's been such a learning experience, even today, having you out here sharing your wonderful experiences and insight. Thank you so much, Norma, for coming to Savvy Central Radio. And everyone, please go get Breaking Down the Walls today. And as Norma said, if you call in to me, you can reach me at 718-713-2289 after the show. And please go to Norma's website at Norma Yaeger, and that's YAEGER.com. And again, Norma, thank you for coming to Savvy Central Radio.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Christina, for having me.